Hi everybody. Sorry it's been such a long time since my last video, but the last month was very, very busy for me. But going forward, hopefully the next few months won't be, so I'll be able to do these reviews with more regularity again. Let's get straight on with this one then. This is going to be my first review of a Graham Masterton book, and I'll talk a bit about who he is in a moment, but firstly let me do my usual preliminaries. This is called The House That Jack Built, and there's the cover art by a guy called Nick Farmer. I like it a lot, even though it is basically just the Bates house from Psycho, but it's still a nice little creepy image. It's not a very long book. It comes in at... oh, I can't do that. I was going to check it, but there's a revelation on the last page that I wouldn't want you to see. But it's something like 380-something pages, not long. Here's the back, which says... after Craig Bellman is horrifically attacked, he and his wife Effie leave New York for the peace of the country, hoping to rebuild their damaged relationship. However, when Craig insists on buying a derelict mansion on a mountainside, despite Effie's serious reservations, their problems are only just beginning. The house echoes with a terrible, agonized sobbing, and Effie, trying to overcome her fears, recruits a spiritualist to deal with its threatening vibrations. But when a gruesome death occurs, she starts to fear that the spirit of the past and of the previous owner, notorious gambler Jack Bellias, is back to haunt them for good. So that sounds like a run-of-the-mill ghost story, doesn't it? But it isn't. And the reason it isn't, I'll come to in a moment. But firstly, Graham Masterton, who is he? He's an English writer, very, very prolific. He's written an enormous number of novels. And he writes in a variety of genres, but his main one is horror. And I guess his second main one would be sex. He's a sex writer. According to Wikipedia, one of his books is called How to Drive Your Man Wild in Bed, which I don't think I'll be reviewing. But he used to be the editor of some pornographic magazines in the UK. And that shows in some of the sex scenes in his books, but I'll get to that again a little bit later. Right, well, most people like this book very much. It's one of his more popular ones. This was a first-time read for me. I had put off reading this for quite a while because I was saving it for when I'd be able to devote proper time to it, which yesterday and the day before I finally was able to do. But I'm afraid I'm going to be going against the grain a bit here and giving a dissenting opinion because I will be recommending this, but it's a lukewarm recommendation. It's not with much enthusiasm. And because I'm going against the common opinion, I'll try my best to lay out why this didn't do it for me. And, basically it comes down to really one thing. In an interview I read, Graham Masterton said that he sets himself one rule when coming up with an idea for a horror novel. And the rule is he insists on coming up with his own threats, his own unique monsters. So you won't find a Graham Masterton book about vampires or werewolves or any of the usual tropes. He tries to come up with some kind of unique threat. And in other books of his that I've read, sometimes he does that very effectively. He has a book called Snowman, which I love and I'll review at some point. Another book called Swimmer, which is another very creative idea. But here it didn't work, in my opinion, and this is why. This book would have been very good if it had just been a basic ghost story, because the scenes that involve hauntings are very well executed, well orchestrated. Masterton's very good at that. He's very good at set pieces, at building suspense, at the payoff of all the suspense. Very, very good at that. He's a very gifted writer. Technically, he's learned his craft. But what he's done here is, because of this rule about coming up with new ideas, he's tried to connect the philosophical idea of eternal recurrence. If you know what that is, it's a fairly convoluted idea that the universe and all existence has been recurring and will recur in a semi-similar form throughout eternity. It's an idea that's been touched upon by everyone from Pythagoras up to Friedrich Nietzsche. And I studied philosophy at university. It was my subject, and in particular the philosophy of space and time was one of my major interests. So one of the main reasons this book didn't do it for me is because this was nothing new or mind-blowing for me. To be honest, I was even spotting flaws in the theory, mistakes in the theory. And it's just too convoluted. It didn't need to be this way because basically it is just a ghost story and a possession story, just with a different, needlessly complicated name. The hauntings are exactly what ghosts would do. The possession part of the story is exactly what happens when someone is going through a possession, a demonic possession. And this book just kept getting interrupted by needless exposition. There's a character in this book called Pepper, and she owns this shop in town which sells all kinds of herbs and spices and spells, and she's into all potions and witchcraft, and every bit of esoterica in the book, she believes in it. And she's a very contrived character because she's there basically to explain what is happening in this supposedly haunted house. It's very clunky. It's very ham-fisted. It's like these like breaks in the narrative. The plot will rumble along at a fair old pace, but then we're interrupted by Pepper spewing out this frankly gibberish about it. She'll say, "Oh, but it's not actually a ghost because ghosts don't exist. It's actually just psychic vibrations which are a result of eternal recurrence." And then she'll start throwing out all this stuff about what the Mayan civilization believed, what Friedrich Nietzsche believed. Einstein's theory of relativity is in there somewhere. All this stuff just mixed together and not explained very well. It says on the back here, one of the reviews says, Graham Masterton's novels are charming, dangerous, and frightening, but all based on immense erudition. That may be true. I'm sure he is an incredibly erudite man, but that doesn't always transfer to explaining the wisdom that you have or the knowledge that you have. And like I said, for me, I just found it to be needlessly convoluted. You've got all these ghostly goings on, and then it's interrupted by this woman saying, but actually that wasn't a ghost, it was blah, blah, blah. Who cares if the result is the same, if it's still behaving and acting like a ghost? And so yeah, anyway, that's the number one criticism. I don't think it needed to be this convoluted, like I said. It would have worked better as just a straightforward ghost story. When you try to rationalize the irrational, that's when I start to lose interest, because I think of myself as a very rational person, a very science-based person. And one of the reasons I go to horror or to fantasy is to be transported to a different kind of reality, to suspend my disbelief, to allow myself to believe things that I, on another level of my mind, know couldn't happen. Here, there are too many passages here where it feels like I'm reading a badly written Wikipedia article on Friedrich Nietzsche's philosophy. So that's that. The second main criticism I have is the characterization. It's connected to the first criticism I just had. This Pepper woman, again, she just so happens to be the world's leading authority on everything from the Mayan civilization up to German existential philosophy. She has a son who just so happens to be obsessed with restoring old houses. That worked out well, didn't it? In fact, about this Pepper character, I mean, the first time Effie, the wife, she goes to see her because she wants to try and understand what's happening. And the very first meeting, this is when they first meet, Pepper asks Effie, she says, "How sensitive are you?" Pepper asked her. "Cat hairs make me sneeze, and some of the summer grasses. Why?" And then Pepper says, "I wasn't talking about hay fever. I was talking about psychic vibrations." Yeah, because, anytime someone asks you how sensitive you are, you're going to automatically assume they're talking about psychic vibrations. And then she launches into this just gibberish about, let me put your mind at rest. There are absolutely and irrefutably no such things as ghosts. There are psychic vibrations, yes. There are very strong psychic vibrations, good and evil, and at some locations, these psychic vibrations can make themselves felt so strongly, blah, 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 blah. Again, all you're doing here is you're just replacing one idea of ghosts with another, equally irrational, but supposedly you think it's some kind of makes more sense. It doesn't, and it didn't need to be there. It's not big and it's not clever, as they say. And the character of Effie, the wife, again, one of my most hated tropes in horror is the skeptic. And what I mean is, like, when there's very obviously bizarre stuff going on, but it doesn't matter. This person still refuses to, face that fact. There's a scene where she's in the house at night, and it's her first night in the house, and she can hear this woman weeping in one of the rooms. So she goes upstairs to investigate. It's a really well done scene. As a ghost story, Masterton executes it wonderfully. It's tense, it's creepy. He builds the atmosphere very well. And obviously, she opens the door and there's no woman there. She can still hear the sobbing and blah, blah, blah. But then she rationalizes it away as saying, oh, maybe it was the wind. On what planet does the wind sound like a woman crying her eyes out? And there's many scenes like that. Another one where her husband gets into bed with her and it's very obvious that he's just had sex with another woman. But again, it's forgotten about. She just puts it out of her mind and life goes on instead of dealing with it in some way. And I think when you do that, it means that nothing really matters. When no matter what haunting happens or what creepy thing happens or what revelatory thing happens involving the husband and the wife, there's nothing riding on it because it ultimately the wife just forgets about it all and never addresses any of it in any way, other than to constantly go to this Pepper woman for some more exposition about the Einstein's relativity theory or the Friedrich Nietzsche's philosophy of eternal return. And yeah, so the characterization wasn't good in this. It was far too contrived. Too many characters who just so happened to be ideally placed. Oh yeah, another one. I mean, at one point, Effie and Pepper, they're reading a book. They're trying to find out anything they can about this guy, Jack Bellius, the guy who built the house. And all they can find is a book about gambling, because he was a gambler, written by some guy who, and the theme of the book that this guy wrote was gambling and gamblers. And there's a small mention of Jack Bellius in this book. So they look up the author. They call him. He just so happens to be home. They go and visit him. He just so happens to live nearby. And so when they meet this guy, remember, the decades before, he wrote a book which just about mentioned Jack Bellius in passing. But then they meet him, and he's the same as Pepper now. He just launches into this theory about how Jack Bellius is trying to come back to our time, and he's not really gone, and he's escaped into the ether. And how did that happen? Did you just happen to independently arrive at the exact same batshit insane theory as Pepper? And he's got it all to hand as well. I mean, they go to his house, and he's like, he goes to a drawer and just happens to have newspaper clippings from back in the day about Jack Bellius. He's got his entire biography memorized. His house is like covered with stuff connected with this. Again, contrived, you know. So that's that. First criticism, needlessly complicated. Second criticism is poor characterization. And the third criticism is very minor, but it's just that this book doesn't have any chapters. It's divided into times like this: Monday, June 28th, 6:28 p.m. And then next one is Tuesday, June 29th, 3:39 p.m. And the result of that was, if I would get to the end of a lengthy chapter, I would have to go back to understand how much time has elapsed. And because it matters, you need to know, have the characters had time to sit on the previous events, or is it immediately after? Because apparently it is important that we know exactly when it's happening, because he's doing it to the minute. June 27th, 3:07 a.m. So that was a bit disorienting, and I did have to constantly keep going back to understand what is the relevance of the previous chapter in terms of how much time has gone by. So yeah, anyway, those are the criticisms. As for the good things, though, like I said, it is well written. Some of the scenes are very well executed. There's a superb sequence where Craig, the husband, or maybe not Craig, is taking revenge upon the people who attacked him. Oh yeah, about the attack. I won't say how exactly he's attacked. I'll let you discover that for yourself if you read it. Keep tissues handy because your eyes will water if you're a guy. But here's the aftermath of it to give you an idea. I'll try and read this without laughing. She needed him to make love to her just once to show that he hadn't been emasculated. She needed to feel his single remaining testicle. Turns out I couldn't do it. And to reassure him that that was all she wanted. Yeah, but that is actually quite a clever thing because it informs Craig's character development. His feeling that he's less of a man and he needs to some kind of become manly again and macho again. And it explains why he's so susceptible and vulnerable to Jack Bellius's influence and evil. Craig is a very unlikable character from the beginning. When we meet him, he's racist, and we find out that he's a philanderer. I kind of liked that about him. Not that he's unlikable, but I mean, it's quite a new thing, really, to make your hero someone you don't like, and but to make him unlikable in a non-cartoonish way. I think Craig was the best character in this. He was drawn very, very realistically and well, I thought. So those are the positives, yeah. It's well written. The scenes, which read like a standard ghost story, are very well done, very well executed. It is clever. I will give it that. It's just not. I'm going to sound very arrogant here, but it's not clever to me because I kind of know all this stuff because I just happened to have studied at university. There was nothing. All the exposition stuff with Pepper maybe some people would find it intriguing and fascinating. Just I didn't, and I don't understand why it was there, other than, like I said, to meet his rule about being original. God forbid he should write something as commonplace as a ghost story. So instead, what he's done, he's written a ghost story in everything but name. And the name he's given to it is ridiculously complex. And I don't think it works all that well. But again, that's just my opinion. This is a popular novel. Those who I went to Goodreads and Amazon just to read some other opinions of it, and those who dislike it for the reason I've just said, that it didn't need to be so complex. And they also criticize some of the chauvinism in this book. I mean, to me, that's to be expected when you consider Graham Masterton's former day job in the porn industry. But I mean, there are some really non-PC parts in this book. At the end, towards the end, one of the characters makes the horrific comment that some women enjoy being beaten by men because it makes them feel needed and wanted. And the sex scenes, again, are kind of loveless and pornographically depicted. Anyway, but I dislike sex scenes in any book by any writer, so that's just a quirk of mine. You might like them. Right, that's going to do it. That's all I have to say about it. A lukewarm recommendation. But if you do read it, or if you have read it, please do let me know your opinion. I'm always happy to have my opinion challenged and to read other people's opinions. That's what this is all about. It's all about just sharing our takes on different things. And I especially like it when someone has a different take to me. So let me know if you've read it or plan to read it. Graham Masterton, The House That Jack Built, written in 1995, by the way. Thank you very much for watching this, if you did watch it, and I'll be back sooner rather than later this time with another review. Until then, take care of yourselves, and bye for now.